first question, when people find out I'm an author, they usually also ask, are you a ninja as well? And, you know, that's a difficult question to answer because obviously ninja is one of the greatest, you know, strengths of a ninja is that you have to be secretive and you don't want anyone to know that you're a ninja. So I can't really answer that question. Number two, everybody always asks, have you ever met an alien? Because I'm a science writer, you know, and obviously another tricky question because I figure if there are aliens here walking around among us, they're probably not going to introduce themselves in an obvious or easy way, right? So I don't know. Maybe I have, maybe you have. Tough question. Number three, I always get this one. Where do you get your ideas, right? Now, people get their ideas in all different places. I actually go to DSW. It's a discount shoe warehouse. Yeah, so they actually, it's not a lot of people know about this, but if you go into any DSW, you can obviously, most people will go there for shoes and, you know, you can tell them your size or you check out the models they have on the racks. But the other thing is if you ask nicely and you just let them know, hey, I'm here looking for ideas, usually someone will give you ideas. Now, the one that I go to in Massachusetts, it's, you know, it's in Hingham, Massachusetts, actually in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And I'll go in, I'll ask for ideas. And usually a little guy comes out of the back and he's kind of older, he's bald, and he wears like a leather apron, you know, and he's got some pencils tucked behind his ear. He's got notepads in his apron. It's like a work apron. And he comes out, he asks me what kind of ideas I'm looking for. And, you know, so I'll tell him stories, things like that. And then usually he gives me 2 or 3 and they're about $20 for the, you know, for the ideas. And if you don't like them, you can return them. So it's great. So I would tell you guys, you know, if you're struggling to find ideas, I would go to DSW and ask them. Now, the other thing people ask me is, you know, and kids especially, is, did you always want to be an author? And that I can definitely say, no, that's not something I thought about when I was little. I thought I was going to be an NBA basketball player. But then I saw a video of myself running, and it was a horrifying scene. I ran like a duck, and I was incredibly slow, and yeah. So I went through a whole bunch of different jobs, and I eventually had this really boring office job. And I would go home at night, and I would write stories about kind of the people I worked with and the office, and I had this idea for a book about a guy who thinks he's like the reincarnation of Albert Einstein. So he thinks he's like the smartest person in the world. And I started spinning these stories together, and I thought, oh, maybe I have something that's kind of like a book here, right? And so eventually I turned that into my first published book here, this one, The Wages of Genius. But this one, the problem with it, besides the fact that it's for adults, is that the whole book takes place in an office. You know, and we don't like offices. Adults don't like sitting in an office all day. Kids, you don't want to sit in an office all day. And so after I finished that, I thought, you know, if I'm going to spend all this time in an imaginary world and you know, in my head when I'm writing these books, I might as well make it interesting, right? So my next book, I turned and I decided to write a pirate novel where the characters travel all over this world to these beautiful places. And then after that, I wrote some books with Bill Nye, the Jack and the Geniuses series, where they go to amazing places around the world. So one book takes place in Antarctica at the South Pole. Another book takes place in Hawaii. And then the third book actually takes place down in the Amazon jungle. So that was another lesson I learned, was if you're going to write a book, and you might as well make the book take place somewhere interesting, because it's going to be a lot more fun to write. Now, one of the things, when I get to this Atlantis story, you know, any good story needs to start with a spark, right? An idea that gets you excited. Now, this one, I had the idea when I was actually walking on the beach one day, and I was picking up trash and kind of picking up bits of plastic and putting them in a bag. And I suddenly had this idea, like, geez, if Atlantis really existed, and if there were this advanced civilization underneath the sea, they would be really mad at us for all the plastic that we're dumping into the ocean and the pollution we're sending in there. And so I thought about that for a little while, and I started thinking about well, first of all, what would they do, right? How would they respond? And that kind of got my wheels spinning with this whole book. Now, before I get into the whole process of it, though, I just want to explain sort of my deep connection to the ocean. So ever since I was little, we always would go to the ocean as a family. My dad was an ocean lifeguard, and my brother and my sisters were ocean lifeguards. And my dad had this thing like, if you went in the ocean, it could heal anything. And when we were really little, by the time we were, maybe by the time we were 5 years old or so, as long as we could swim a little bit, maybe 6, my dad had this thing where he would try to get you over your fear of the waves. And so he'd have you swim out in the ocean with him, and he would kind of back up a little bit, maybe just 5 feet away. And he'd say, okay, come on, swim to me. And that's all you got to do. Just swim to me. And so you'd swim to him and you get closer, but you'd never quite get close enough to grab him. And he'd say, come on, you can do it. Very encouraging, very positive. Keep swimming to me, keep swimming to me. And you'd be sitting there like, geez, I've been swimming for a really long time and I haven't gotten 5 feet. What's going on here, And then finally, after however many minutes of this, he'd put his hand out and he'd stop and you'd grab onto his arm and he'd go, great job. And he'd say, now look back. And you'd look back at the shore. I'd be like 200 yards away, a couple football fields from the shore, way out past the waves. And he'd say, see, I told you could do it, So that was always like a standard family trick. Now, the other thing we also did was I always went body surfing and surfing with my family, and especially my dad and my older brother. But my brother especially was more of like a risk taker, and he liked big waves and things like that. And I'm not so much that way. So whenever the waves were too big or it was too stormy, I'd say to my dad and my brother, no, I'm just going to sit on the beach. It's okay. I don't want to go out. And they'd say, come on, you got to do it. And I'd say, no, I'll just stay on the beach. So this one time, I'm about 10 years old, and I refused to go out in the water. I said, these waves are too big. And they said, all right, well, let's just go to this special beach, and the waves will probably be easier there. I said, okay, fine. And it's really early in the morning. The beach is empty. And we go down to this special beach. But the waves aren't any easier there. It's still scary and big. And I think, there's no way I'm paddling out into that stuff. So they said, okay, fine, stay on the beach. So I sat there on the beach with my surfboard, and I was all stubborn. There's no way I'm going out in those waves. And my dad and my brother paddle right out, and they start surfing. And I'm sitting there, and I'm stubborn and mad. And I don't know how long I was there, maybe an hour or so, when finally I see them and they're pointing at stuff. And I'm not looking. I'm not interested. I'm still mad. And then they start laughing. I'm like, what are they laughing at? And right around then, out of the corner of my eye, I see this old lady running down the beach, jumping into the water. And she's got this flowery bathing cap on with the little flowers sticking out and a big rubber strap underneath and nothing else, right? So this lady was completely naked. And I looked and I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening? There's a naked woman running into the water. And then I look around and I look behind me, and there's a whole bunch of other people without their clothes on lying around on the beach. And I look out at my dad and my brother, and they're dying laughing. So the next thing you know, I grab my surfboard, I paddle straight out through those big waves and get out with them. And they are dying laughing, but they said, hey, see, we told you you could do it. We told you could get out through the waves. So they tricked me the whole time and brought me to a nude beach to force me to get into the water. Yeah. What does that have to do with Atlantis? Absolutely nothing. It's just kind of a funny, ocean story.